morning. Robin's just about to pop us on. Away we go. All right, so what we've done is a little bit of a workaround. So the meeting will be in two parts. I've sort of started a new live stream. So this is the continuation of the Nelson City Council meeting on Thursday, the 25th of June, and we are partway through our agenda at 2:45 in the afternoon. And we're going to do the extension of meeting time now, just for the efficiency. Extending the meeting beyond 6 hours, is it? It is beyond. Okay, Jay, thank you. Moved by Councillor Bowater, seconded by Councillor Skinner. I'll put that, all those favour, aye. Aye. Against? Carried with a lot of abstentions. Righty-ho, we've got item 13 is on the agenda now, so we're at pages 115 to 125 of the agenda. And the topic we're discussing is the deconstruction, I particularly like that word, of 23 Halifax Street, formerly the Mediterranean Food Warehouse building. So we've got Rosie and Jane are here, and they have got their report. And Jane, are there any corrections or additions that you want to make to this report?
No, there are no corrections or additions.
Thank you very much. I have to say, I found this a very interesting report. I really did. So thank you for the way you've written it. I found it very good. Questions. So we're going to questions, Councillor Edgar, then Councillor Laurie.
Thank you for that, through you, Madam Mayor. Just a couple of questions. On section 5.3, top of page 117, just talks about risk of the risk to pedestrians on the surrounding footpaths is potentially greater, etc. I was just wondering if we needed to be closing or cordoning off any of the surrounding footpaths in the interim prior to deconstruction.
Thank you. Through the chair, the section 5.3 to 5.5 is quite some generic statements, quite specific to the building, but not engineering, more of a health and safety perspective of the decision. In terms of the risk and the requirements for us to do anything further, under the Building Act, we've got until 2022 to take further action on the building, and we don't need to do anything prior to that in terms of legislation. We're already mitigating the risk that we talk about in here by not having tenants in the building and taking this action now to demolish or deconstruct, as we're saying, the building earlier. So we're mitigating the risk by reducing the amount of time that we're exposed to it. But further to this, the building unit itself could ask us to carry out actions such as close the footpath or reduce access to the building if they deemed that needed to happen, and they haven't in this case asked us to do that. As the building owner and the asset owner, we could take a decision to do that without being asked, and that's dependent on how we feel about how we're managing the risk in the interim. Just one further point on that is when we get to the site being established and constructed, there will be mitigation measures in place then as well in terms of reducing the site.
Okay, thank you. I'll leave it up to the individual health and safety assessments and Building Act requirements. And I just had one more question, just project time frame. And in 5.24 it says the building consent is to be applied for in August 2020. I was just wondering, you did mention in 5.19 that it was likely that physical works would commence early 2021. I may be hopeful that 5-month time frame is a generous one. It just seems a long time frame before physical works might commence on site.
Through the chair, the timeframe allows for the consent to be applied for, granted, the contract negotiations and establishment of procedures on site to occur, and then for construction to start post-Christmas, because it's a bit fiddly starting on site and then closing the site over the Christmas period. So that's what is allowed for there. I've talked to our capital projects team to see if it can be done any faster, and they're of the view that what we're doing is as fast as we can do it.
Lovely, and thank you very much for the deconstruction approach and good report.
Thank you, Councillor Laurie, then Councillor McGurk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yesterday morning, I was lucky enough, along with other councillors, to attend the City Streets for People breakfast at the Mahi Tahi CoLab, which was exceptionally well run, I think, by Councillor Rainey. You did a really good job, Pete.
Thanks.
And that's true, I mean it. And one of the things that became clear is that we've got a lot of people with businesses in the central city who are up for change, who actually recognise that something has to change for us to go forward. But they have obvious concerns about parking. And the thing that came up quite a bit was people were saying, look, you know, we're up for some change, but where will the parking go? And so I'm wondering, if we deconstruct the Mediterranean Food Warehouse, can we use it as a car park, a temporary car park? And how many cars do we think we could fit on that very useful central city adjacent park that might help us do other great things in our central city?
Through the chair, yes, this decision that I'm bringing today is about deconstructing the building and not about the future use of the site once the building's gone. But you're right, it will be, after this, it will be a vacant site and there will be other opportunities to use that land. It's a 620 or so square metre site. I haven't looked into how many car parks you could fit onto that, but we can follow up.
So through the chair, Councillor Laurie asked me that question just before for the meeting. I've done a really quick back of the cigarette packet, and probably maybe 10.
How many?
At 10 at a push.
10 car parks.
Yep, it's only 28 by 23. So
Put them on top of it.
no, no stacking, no,
Councillor
Okay.
McGurk.
Thanks.
or snacking. So
Yeah, thanks, through you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Eager asked one of the questions I had in mind. There's asbestos in the building. Are there any other risks in terms of that we're aware of or that we don't know?
Through the chair, as part of the process to confirm how we're best to make use of all the parts of the building, we're getting a hazardous review of what's there, and that will identify how we manage what the risks are and how we.
Okay, so that's work underway. Great. And the other question is the contractor, is there any way that we can offset the materials that are recovered as offsetting the costs, or does that rest with the contractor?
Through the chair, it will depend on how we construct the contract for it, and we're waiting until we have the materials all identified as in a methodology about how the building's deconstructed before we confirm how that works.
So you haven't got any carry floorboards or?
There will be parts of the building that are able to be reused, or in as much as we can, we're trying to divert
Well, I'm just thinking,
waste to landfill.
what I'm asking is there any value that we can extract from the deconstruction that can offset the cost of it?
This cost will include any offsets.
Okay, thank you.
Right, thank you. Councillor Niels. Sorry? Oh, all right, moved and seconded, so it's fine. And Councillor Niels-Stevens.
Thanks. Yeah, so this is to be funded from the library redevelopment project, primarily because it's on the location of the Riverside precinct. Is there any implications from this decision if we were to construct a library in a different location?
Through the chair, regardless of where the library goes, this is a building that is earthquake prone and will perform poorly in an earthquake, and the recommendation is to demolish it, and we have until 2022 to do that, so we could take longer to do it, but our recommendation in this report is that it happens prior to confirmation of the library scope. So I think that this decision would would be required regardless of where the library is.
Yeah, so not as to whether or not we perhaps more of a financing question, just if we're taking that money from the redevelopment fund, if it then doesn't ultimately contribute towards the redevelopment, do we run into any problems? I agree that it needs to come down.
Through the chair, as I understand it, and Roger might need to correct me if I'm misleading you, but when the library budget was established for the 2018 LTP, there was always an assumption that this building would be required to be demolished as part of the project. And so that's what this is. That's why it's being funded out of the project. In terms of financials, it's being treated as a capital item, and there may be some financial implications if it's not. If there's something not done to the site afterwards, but even as talking about car parking, that may address that. If we're providing new asset on the site, it could be capitalised.
Thank you. Through the chair, may I add to that?
Yes, absolutely, Roger.
Thank you. And just to say, what Jane says is absolutely right. There is nothing in the decision that you're taking today which will constrain your options available as to the site of the future library. It is funded from the Elmer Turner Library redevelopment project, and if it turned out that council preferred to do that redevelopment somewhere else, well, then we'd revisit the financial implications at that time.
Thanks.
Councillor Noonan.
I just want to follow that up because I thought we were told in the past that if we do not, if we take it out of the library budget and we don't build the library there, then it becomes an operational cost completely rather than a capital cost.
Let's just get that one sorted out. So at the moment, we've got a resolution to develop the library on the Riverside precinct, but the exact location isn't specified. So I don't think it matters if it's not exactly on that block. Is that the issue? I think it can, because of the consequential parking changes or other changes that would come with it.
Through the chair, to clarify, is your question that if the building is demolished and it's not needed to be demolished, it turns out it's not needed to be demolished as part of the library project, would the cost be operational expenditure? Is that, I might have to look to Nikki for this, but in theory, if we are to replace the asset with another asset, it can be a capital cost. So if we replace it with car parking or with some other item, it could be a capital.
I think that sounds right. Yeah. All right. It's got to be a capital cost.
Capital cost.
Something's got to go there.
Right. So it'd have to be something, not, it'd have to be something in the LTP.
Not necessarily. I mean, car park. We did the same with car park.
Oh, we did too.
Sorry.
With I know what you mean.
Oh, car park.
Yes, I do. New Street car park. Okay. Right. Any other questions? Councillor Courtney.
Just to, Jane, the building isn't leased, is it? No. You've got here in 5.22 bullet point, first bullet point, removing stored items. Who from the building? Who's storing items there?
Through the chair, council as an organisation has stored some items in there, pieces of furniture and various other, I haven't been in the building to see, but it has been a vacant space that we've been using for storage.
Thank you. All right, so it's been moved and seconded. Now I'm going into no more questions. So I'm going into speaking. A question for Councillor Skinner was speaking. Was it?
Just a quick question in regards to recycling. Well intended. Are there no materials that we can recycle? I know every building's I know Brian covered that, but putting are there like the windows, is it timber on it's a concrete building, it had a fire damage. I'm struggling from my layman's view of what could be recycled.
Through the chair, the first step which we're underway with at the moment is itemising what's there and what we can not necessarily recycle, but all the ways that we can reuse what's there to give it another life or to divert waste from landfill. So there will be some items that we can reuse and recycle, and there will be others that we have to find other ways to dispose of.
I'm just trying to sort of visualise what can be recycled. I'm struggling to think that if there is anything we can recycle, it's costing us an extra 74,000.
Can I just keep a little bit of order in the meeting? Is that all right? I know it's afternoon, but
I mean, I don't need
need
detail, but it sounds good sometimes if the timber, etc. By the time you pull the nails out and the wood's brittle, you can't use it. The concrete's not usable. Windows are only for that type of building are only suitable for certain. Are there really an end result for some of this materials? Is there a buyer for some of these materials? Some buildings, yes, but this building, I doubt.
Through the chair, as I said, the initial part of this project is determining that there is a market and that we will be able to recycle those things. It is expected that there will be items that we can reuse through it.
So if we find there is very little that can be, then we may demolish rather than.
Look, I'm sure if Jane, if you went out and you went through that process and the answer was, look, actually, this isn't a building suitable for a deconstruction, I'm absolutely sure that the officers would make sure they came back and told us so we knew that it was no longer a deconstruction process and it was a demolition project.
That'd be good.
Okay.
We're signing off.
Yes, we are. Look, I think the realist, if you're finding that it's very marginal, if the advice is, look, it's very marginal, then I'm sure that would come back to us. Jane will make sure it comes back to us, won't you, Jane? Thank you. Right, Councillor O'Neill-Stevens got one final question.
Yes, just sort of following on, just slowly getting my head around it in terms of this, Councillor Noonan's points around OPEX versus CAPEX funding. If we are to replace on that site an asset, then it can stay as CAPEX. I just want to get a sense of, is there what would and wouldn't count as an asset in terms of, would a park count as an asset, some trees, and what happens if we were interested in selling off that piece of land and instead of redeveloping that exact site?
I'll go to that. I think it would go to the sale costs. Then you'd have to.
Yeah.
So through the chair, I think just leaving it bare probably wouldn't count as an asset, but if you put some actually asphalted it or whatever those engineers do and stuff like that, and put some fencing up, that would count as an asset. And obviously if you did sell it, it would just be offset against the sales proceeds because effectively you've helped the purchaser.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right, so no further questions. In that case, we'll move into debate. Councillor Fulton.
Oh, thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I really wanted to start off by saying how much I enjoyed reading this report and how delightful it is that the infrastructure team have picked up on the climate lens and delivered so well. It's really exciting, and thank you everyone in the room who've thought about deconstruction versus demolition. Parks team, well, Parks and apologies, Parks team. Anyway, I love this report and I appreciate Councillor Skinner's sentiments that this might not be the best first deconstruction project because the building is significantly concrete. However, even concrete can be used in places out of landfill, and that's part of the process of trying to make sure things get second lives. So I think it's fantastic that we're taking this approach. I note it costs 10% more, but I actually think that's fairly insignificant. I expected it to be far more, and that the biggest cost is around the asbestos removal, and sort of you've got large contingencies around COVID alert levels. So hopefully it comes in at a lower cost than this, but I really applaud you all for having taken this path in terms of thinking about what we do with things which in the past we threw away, and really appreciate how mindful you've been of the climate emergency we declared last year.
It's Fulton. Councillor McGurk, you're all right just to write a reply, because I'll go to Councillor Laurie first.
I'll do a right reply.
Okay, quickly to Councillor Laurie, and then I'll cross to the writer reply from.
So I support this. I think that building's been there for far too long, and I'll be pleased to see it go. I go back to what I was saying before. I do think it does create an opportunity for some parking, which will give us the opportunity perhaps to do something else really interesting in the central city that will be good for everyone. I would like to chuck in as a possibility, picking up on the climate change theme, that perhaps it could be a park reserved for electric vehicles. Or perhaps we could have a electric vehicle charging station put on the site. So I think that's something we could consider. That way we get more parking and we're respecting our climate change priorities.
Councillor Noonan and then Councillor
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, the deconstruction idea, I think, is a great one to look at. Firstly, I'm just disappointed because I wanted to drive the bulldozer into that building and it's not going to happen now. But that's okay. Look, I can see that there's a contingency of 215,000, so I'll be keeping an eye on that. I just wanted everybody to know that. So otherwise, I support.
Thank you. Councillor McGurk.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. A lot of what I was going to say has already been seen. I certainly commend the officers for bringing this report forward to us. It's a different way of dealing with the way we would normally take buildings down. There's probably three things I would say in favour of this. One is that building's an eyesore. It's been an eyesore for a long time. It's gone. It's on one of our main streets, the entrance to Richmond, to the city, and you met with that. It's awful. So I'm glad to see it gone. The other one too is, with their climate change things with emergency is actually consistent with that. But more importantly is when we're dealing with construction waste, building waste is a big contributor to our landfill. So some of the costs that were additional savings through in terms of the cost of disposing at a landfill. So there are three good reasons. Get rid of an eyesore, climate lens, and it's actually cheaper than than just dumping in the ground in landfill. So please support.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. All right. Before we go on to the next item, I'm just going to invite Matt Bruce to come up to the table. Matt, hello. Will you come up and join us today? Now, we just talked about absolutely creative thinking, redirection of waste, all the things that are good about reducing emissions. And then I tell you what, this isn't on the report, this isn't on your agenda today, but then Matt went one better. And he went, and I want to deliver social outcomes as well. So hello, Matt, a creative thinker from the infrastructure team. So there are creative thinkers throughout this whole organisation. Would you like to tell the councillors what your creative idea was and the results, and just make sure you press that microphone?
So I'm assuming this is in relation to the parking meters.
It's lollipops. It's all about lollipops.
Cool. Awesome. I was sitting at my desk and then got called down here, so I'm assuming.
Oh, you know why? Oh, that Margaret, that was a bit mean.
So obviously we had a lot of the old single bay Duncan meters, which are on street at the moment. And it was an idea to get rid of those, and rather than just dumping them as they're not used for anywhere else anymore, was to sell them to people as a memento of obviously Nelson history. So that was the plan, and I understand they've now sold out. So
yeah, so 150 metres have been sold in less than 24
I've got
hours.
my money. I've got.
And it's too late. You're too late. You're too late. What I will say, Councillor Skinner, is you could negotiate with Miss Barton because she's got two, and so the price of them is going to escalate.
I've got money.
But the deal is, so what Matt's managed to do with this a great idea, and I want to thank the customer services team as well because they've been part of this. So they have managed in 24 hours, they have sold out and they have raised $1,500 for Five Shire Foundation. So Matt, well done. So thank you. That's absolutely fantastic. I must have, when this first came through to me, I went, what? So fantastic. So thanks, Matt, because we've been a wee bit, if you've any ideas about how to sort out council's finances and funds, can you just make sure that you send those through as well? So thank you very much. Really appreciate that. Thanks for your work.
How long did they take to sell out?
24 hours.
Well, I think that they were vastly too cheap.
So, yeah, no, it's all good. Well done. I'm sure Five Shire are going to be absolutely thrilled. Okay, next item on the agenda, do you want to break for 5 minutes or keep going? I think we might just keep going, actually. Thanks, Matt. Okay. All right, so the next agenda item is what are we up to now? Page 126, and we're on the Almatuna Library Civic House Climatorium report. And I'll vote Mr. Ward to come to the table. So welcome, Chris. Nice to see you. Oh, it says Pat. sorry, just turn to the back of the report. Author is Pat. Is it a combined effort?
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor. No, Chris wrote the report, but the computer system that controls our reports won't let a contractor put his name on it. So no other G wanted the name on it. So Roger refused. So it's my name on the report, Madam Mayor.
Oh, yeah,
But
I think it's a very good report, Chris.
Yes, it is.
So, very good report. All right, so Chris, I'll hand over to you. Are there any corrections or additions that you would like to make to the report?
Thank you, Mayor Rachel. No, there are no corrections or anything to add.
So just in terms of, I think that the council members are all familiar with this. You've been through a workshop process, so I'm just open for any questions. So any questions this morning, afternoon? Councillor Rainey, questions?
Madam Chair, in terms of the suggestion that we workshop this particular thing, I agree we have. But one of the things that I find that is a little bit lacking is the opportunity for councillors to workshop the spatial plan for the city, which hasn't indeed come back to us as an item yet. Now, we had a brief look at that when was that workshop? Tuesday? Where we touched on it. But I'm picking that there's an appetite for further discussion from councillors with a whole lot of things feeding into it regarding spatial planning. And I just would perhaps like to get a comment from Chris Ward about that particular aspect, and with the thought that maybe this is a little bit premature in that regard, the considerations that we're given today.
Mr. Ward.
So thank you. Through the chair, I think as I've laid out in the report, there's quite a long history to the decisions around the library in particular. The spatial plan, as I understand it, is looking at the city centre as a whole strategically. And whilst the library location is of interest to the spatial plan, it shouldn't. I wouldn't expect that it would be driving the direction of the plan in any way. And so, you know, we have a project, particularly in the library, which the community is expecting would happen within this LTP cycle. And this is really just a process report in order to help advance that decision.
So I think the options were set out in the report. In terms of the report, you've basically got a couple, you're talking stepped approach versus integrated approach, and that's what you're wanting us to consider today. Is it, just before I go to Councillor Sanson and Councillor McGurk, just in terms of that stepped approach, I did have a conversation actually with Councillor Noonan a couple of nights ago, and one of the things about that description, I just want to check with this work, is when we discussed this, whether an aligned approach might be a way to think of it, because what I'm imagining is that it's not one step completed before you can take the next step. It's just so that I can understand that a little bit better.
Yeah, look, I was struggling for a better descriptor for this approach as well. It really is around building through a series of decisions the overall picture. And so it takes into account whatever's happening with the spatial plan at each stage as well. It tests some of the ideas with council at each stage. And if I could give the example of the climatorium, I'm not sure what council's thinking is on a climatorium at this stage, and I don't particularly want to wait until the end of a process to find out that, you know, the options that I've been considering aren't aligned with what council's thinking in that space. So that's just one of the examples where, you know, it would be helpful to have that discussion before we end it to the final business case, business case options. But it really is developing, I think, a progressive approach, I guess, in terms of where how I see it now.
Thank you. Councillor Simpson and Councillor McGurk.
Thanks. Thank you through the chair, Madam Mayor. Kia ora, Chris. I've got a number of questions. I'll try and keep them short and just, yeah. So I am curious as to what you think the expected life of the library asset might be.
So through the Mayor, with this, that hasn't been established yet. And that's not the purpose of this report, to establish that. That would be brought to council at the stage where we're considering the options for the library. So, you know, it's a really good question. And I guess it's very typical of the questions that there are on each of the three projects, and kind of underlines the complexity of the decisions that council has to make, because that type of question is absolutely integral to the decision about the library. But not so much integral to the decision about the Civic House. And so, you know, thinking about that in a library context makes it easier to make some decisions in that space.
So I think from the report, the value, it's got at the moment about 14.8 million. I don't know if that's a final anticipated budget for the library or no.
So through the chair, my understanding is that there was 14.9 million put into the LTP. I think the parks team have just taken $1 million away from that. But there was always an intention for officers to come back to council once the project had been better defined, and that will come through to you at the business case for the library.
So I guess where I'm at with this process is I'm new on council, so I don't have the background that other councillors have around the site and that kind of thing. So I'm just kind of coming in with my governance risk lens on, and my understanding is that we have got a spatial plan coming that's going to look at, I guess, significant investment options, civic projects that we might need to undertake in the short to medium to long term, and whereabouts we might want to do those. The piece that's kind of missing for me around the stepped approach is that I feel at this point that there's, I guess, a pre-selection of the library site without the underlying information that I feel I need from a risk perspective around is the site vulnerable, what kind of inundation impacts can we expect from the coastal Ministry for the Environment, Coastal Hazards and Climate Change advice for the local government, and then the current Climate Commission advice on current data. They are advising council to be very mindful of this when we're making investment decisions, that we are really planning for the future and for climate impacts. So I guess, what are your comments on that?
I guess, again, thank you for the question, and through the Mayor. The decision around the site has been made by council twice. It has looked at the library and confirmed on 2 occasions that the Riverside area is where the library will be. So I guess that's part of the answer in terms of why that site is being preferred at the moment, is just building on council decision. Council has, in the case of its own properties, council has 2 bites of the cherry, I guess, in terms of considering these matters. There's one as property owner and developer, and council will take the advice that is available in terms of best ways to, if it decides to build a library on that site, how best to design to mitigate the effects of climate change. But council has also got the role as the consenting authority, and so there's an opportunity through any resource consent and application for those matters to be considered by the consenting authority as well. So they're certainly very important factors, but and the business case will cover off from the property development side those issues.
Okay, thanks very much, Chris.
Thank you. Councillor Fulton. Oh, sorry, no, Councillor McGurk, then Councillor Fulton, and Councillor Neil Stevens.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you. Thanks for the report, Mr. Ward. I don't know, it's, if we take the stepped approach, which is the preferred option, or is the recommendation to report, I'm just wondering, are there any elements or in that stepped approach that we don't know yet, or any gaps that you're aware of that would force us to go back and review? So I suppose as we're going through, do we have all the information that we need or the data that we need to make an informed decision as we step our way through, or are there some gaps there that we just don't know that may force us to come back?
So through the mayor, I guess we can never know everything with 100% certainty, and the risk component will form a significant part of any report the council considers. There's no decisions being made today, and if council felt that there was some omission at each of the stages of the stepped approach, then there is the opportunity to ask for more information at that stage, but I don't know what we don't know. But in terms of flushing out those issues, I think breaking the issues down into manageable chunks actually gives council a better opportunity to see if there is anything missing and if there is any further information that it requires to make that decision.
Councillor Fulton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, this is an excellent report. It's very short, which I like, and it's really clear and well written. So thank you, Pat and Chris. Chris, I know when you workshopped this, I had some concerns around the stepped approach, and you've relieve my concerns, because what you've done in your report is you've outlined the step process. So you've outlined what order you will do the steps. And my concern had been that the library might be the first step, but it's actually the last step. So I'm really reassured by that. Thank you. My questions are around 5.16 of the report and 5.24. So on 5.16, you mentioned that discussions have been constructive and a range of options are being canvassed with WACA2, and that further concept design work has been commissioned, and this work will be available to inform future decisions. Will that work come to us via a workshop before the 13th of August? So before 5.18.1?
I think through the mayor, I think most of the options that relate to Civic House have probably been developed already, and I think I need to check in terms of what WACA2 have presented to council previously. We've been having discussions about potential other orientations of the library on the precinct, and so as I said, the conversation is ongoing and is constructive.
So 5.16 is really just referring to the library and the climatorium concept rather than Civic House.
As I understand, the WACA2 have presented some information around a Civic House proposal to council previously. Yeah.
Okay, but it was very brief. So my only concern is that I believe that that conversation needs to come before the 13th of August meeting, and likewise the spatial plan, which you've sort of alluded to already, probably needs to come to us for a workshop before the 13th of August. So I just wanted to fit that into the timeline, I guess, and be reassured that those other two pieces of work which are happening will inform councillors at the 13th of August and 24th of September meetings.
So through the mayor, unfortunately, I don't have the spatial plan isn't under my authority, and because I don't have any. But I guess this is I'm working alongside the city development team. I've been sitting up there whenever I come into Civic House, and so we maintain the information flows between the two parts of the project. I'm not sure in terms of And for each of the stages, the reports that I've set out, there will be some commentary from that team within. But I guess there is a risk. My understanding is the city development team are extremely busy at the moment with post-COVID responses and Centre City working, and that the spatial plan has been is kind of been deferred for a few months and will be closer to the end of the year. And I guess this is just an attempt to keep the process moving. And if there's any flags that that team raises, they'll be reported through to council.
Ms Barnes actually wants to speak, so I just want to see if you see any concerns about the timing.
Through the Mayor, Mr Ward's correct. The team has been working with Mr Ward directly to make sure that as things progress, information is shared across the two. And he's also correct in that there has been a delay in the delivery of that spatial plan, given that we've had all of the innovative streets, etc. work that's been going on. But certainly in terms of where things are heading, there's a two-way conversation that's going on.
Okay, so thank you for that, Chris. And I know that that's sort of beyond your control, and what you've laid out here is very clearly within your control and within your parameters. So I appreciate that, but I guess I'm just slightly concerned that there's two other pieces of work which need to feed into this, and getting the timing of that right is important too, so we can make the most informed decisions in a fairly speedily process. I really like the timeline and I appreciate that.
So through the Mayor, I might just add something that might give a little bit of clarity. The intention with the spatial plan is that it is a high-level document. It's looking at guidance and giving precincts in a very generic sense. It doesn't get down to the level of detail of individual sites. So in terms of being able to progress, and it looks at the street frontages, etc., in terms of, you know, trees and how we get corridors and those sorts of things. So the content of that, in my opinion, is not going to impact on the decisions that's being made around the library site because it's at a very high level. But in terms of the general thinking about where precincts might generally be, those sorts of things, absolutely the team is working with Chris around that.
Okay, fantastic.
So no, there's no fatal flaw as you see it, Claire, at this point.
Through the
the timing, there's enough dialogue.
Correct.
I guess I just want the spatial plan in my head to line up with the.
Well, I'd like to think we'd get some sort of briefing on it. I would have thought between now and then. I'm sure Alan's far enough along. He can give us a bit of a briefing on it.
I think it's just as a guidance. I think it would be helpful just to have that slight guidance of where that's heading, because to line them up.
Thank you. Councillor Neil Stevens.
Yeah, I won't ask my question about the spatial plan. I think Councillor Fulton's done that well, but yeah, it's potentially involving, you know, a relocation of the city's, one of the city's largest employers and one of our biggest community assets. I think even at a high level, there'd probably be some seep through. My question, or the first question I have, is around a stepped approach, and just looking at that timeline there. Is it going to be faster if at any point we were to reject the sort of internal assumption of a location? I see there that we'd be making a decision, so we could at, you know, the 13th decide that we were going to relocate Civic House to the Riverside precinct, and then a month later decide that we didn't want to confirm the library at the same precinct. I'm just wondering whether we can sort of step forwards and then that final step trip up and actually be back at the.
So through the Mayor, I guess it's council's prerogative to make decisions on the day as it sees fit. But I think that the argument would be that, you know, the Civic House, for me, the Civic House decision is the key one, because it is the big piece of infrastructure. It contains a large number of people, and it has a number of functions that it has to perform to our community. The library, with all respect to the librarians, has a much simpler set of functions and is an easier one in terms of, particularly given that you have a history in terms of promoting the library on the Riverside precinct. I think it would be highly unusual for council to make a decision to put Civic House over onto Riverside and not have the library alongside it, but it could happen. But I guess just to answer your question, what the stepped approach allows is narrowing in of the focus in terms of the business cases, because if for the sake of argument, council would decide not to relocate Civic House anywhere or not to relocate it to Civic House, that cuts out a whole amount of work that needs to be done business casing that option.
But if we get that narrowing wrong, we'll be sort of back to the other approach, integrated.
Yeah, look, and then through the mayor, I guess as part of my role is to help council through that process and try and guide you. I would say that a decision on Civic House that's made in August doesn't mean we would start laying the bricks in this location or any other location, for a number of months, if not a year plus. And the timeline for the stepped approach would still allow council to catch up with itself if it decided to go in a particular direction with that.
And then just on a sort of more looking back, has council ever, I know we've looked at potential other locations, including the bottom of this building, but have we ever taken a full sort of step back and taken a high level approach as to where we could or would want the library?
So through the mayor, I don't think that council has considered it. Certainly officers have considered at various times different options for the library, including on other council owned land. But there's been no real a driver for moving away from Riverside, both in terms of the space that's available there and community accessibility.
And then finally, just sort of acknowledging that within that stepped approach, there is that sort of focused assumption. If this council wasn't of the belief that Riverside was necessarily the best location, would you still recommend pursuing the stepped approach?
So through the mayor, yes, I would, because I still, as I said earlier in my introduction, council doesn't have a particular position on climatorium, and that is a relevant project. It has done more work on Civic House, but the level of planning that's gone into a potential relocation of Civic House isn't as far along the lines as the level of planning that's gone into the library, for example. So in order to break down those issues into manageable chunks, yes, I would pursue that.
Councillor Laurie. And anybody else for questions? I've got Councillor Rika, apologies. No, would you like to move it?
So, yeah,
Councillor Fulton wants to move the recommendation. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Noonan, and then going to Councillor Laurie, and then Councillor Rika.
I'm sorry if I missed this. Sort of days catching up with me. 3:30. So, by receiving this report, are we confirming effectively this location as the future for the library?
The council has already, so through the mayor, the council has already confirmed this location. However, there will still be an option when council discusses the substantive paper on the library. If council were to choose a different option, then it could do at that time. So you're not locked into 100% into this site.
Can I just check that we confirmed that exact site was where the library was going? Because I thought it was that precinct. We confirmed that we were going to have a library in the Maitai precinct. I didn't know it meant exactly on the site that it is occupying now.
No, I don't think that's what Mr. Ward meant. So I'll go back to Mr. Ward because it's in the report. I'm not sure quite where the paragraph is.
Apologies, I thought I had made myself clear.
I think Councillor Laurie was out of the room. But
apologies, Councillor. So the council has decided that the library, the current decisions are around the Riverside precinct for the library.
Through the chair, but that doesn't mean the exact site that it's on now. Yeah, thank you.
Right, Councillor Rika.
Thank you, through you. Just in relation to the integrated approach, 5.2.1, you talk about, at least 18 different combinations. and it's possibly hinted at in the risks and disadvantages, but experience would suggest to me that there is an even higher risk around time slippage, and then the risk of not meeting LTP timelines if we were to take the integrated approach versus the stepped ones. Just wondering about your degree of optimism within here.
Speaking as a consultant, so through the mayor, look, the complexity is the one that worries me. Doing the work doesn't bother me one way or the other in terms of, as an intellectual challenge, it'd be a fantastic project to wrap your head around. The complexity of choosing whether council wants a climatorium, where it wants a climatorium, what a climatorium is, just for that simplest of projects, thrown in with, does Civic House remain where it is? Does it move to Riverside? Is there another location or two locations in the city centre which would be suitable? So that's 4. And then if you chose to move Civic House to another location, would you move the library with it? Would you maintain the library on Riverside? The complexity and the interactions just stack up and stack up. And I think it's very hard to see how you would, and I'm sure there's different views on each of these projects around this table. And I really worry about getting towards the end of a process where you've got multiple options, and there isn't a unified voice in terms of individual components of those projects. I just think it would make decision making very difficult, and preparing the information for that decision making, as Councillor Edgar's pointed out, would take some time. There's a lot of information that would need to be pulled together.
Thank you.
All right, that's the end of the question round. Oh, one little quick question. Okay.
One quick question,
and then
I've got Madam Chair. It's just something I thought I'd picked it up maybe with the spatial plan, but I just want to double check in terms of the flood modelling 5.9. So officers believe that the risk of that site can be managed through appropriate design features. Can that come back and when can we be briefed on that, please?
So through the mayor, I guess my intention is, in terms of this project, was to bring that back as part of the decision making for the library business case.
So through the mayor, I might be able to assist. We're proposing to have a workshop the hour before the next Environment Committee meeting on the 23rd of July. So 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock to go through.
Fantastic. Right. So that reassures me around the 13th of August date. So now I'm very pleased that that's happening, because I think that's the part of the spatial plan which I wanted reassurance around. So thank you. Chris, you might not have known that because I only knew about it yesterday.
Thank you. So just, and that was actually going to be my question as well in terms of that flood modelling. So I think for the benefit of council, because we had a busy Nelson Plan governance meeting last night, it was last evening, and one of the things that has bothered me, and it was actually Councillor Sanson sent through, thank you very much for the earlier questions in relation to this report. And one of the things that has been, I've gone, is there a fatal flaw here? Is there a fatal flaw around flood risk in terms of this location? So I've been conscious that the Chief Executive has been working through the flood model, and last night he was able to update the Nelson Plan Governance Group. And I don't know, Pat, whether you want to just give a quick where it's at. So the consequence of that is this briefing that's coming to the Environment Committee. And I must admit, I felt enormously reassured once I got the update last night, because that for me has been the one that's been, and I could see from Councillor Sanson's questions, it was sitting there as well in your questions.
So it's been something that's been bothering the mayor and I since the Gibbons Group made a presentation and linked to the long-term plan, that some of our flood modelling was too conservative. And when we've looked into it, some of the work we've been doing is too conservative. That an approach that works for other areas of the New Zealand doesn't work for us because of the huge tidal range we have. For example, it's pretty easy if you're down below the State Highway Bridge. It's just the 1 in 100 year tide in 2130. And if you're upstream of probably the Bridge Street Bridge, it's the 1 in 100 year flood in 2130. But in between, that 100-year flood interacts with the tide. And so if, for example, you model the 1 in 100-year flood against the king tide, the biggest tide of the year, which on the face of it doesn't sound unreasonable, that's a 1 in 8,000-year event. And if you model against the spring tide, it's called the 6%. So 6% of tides are bigger than it. So that's still a big tide for the year. That's a 1 in 1,000-year event. And so we've been, over the last 6 months, commissioned Tonkin and Taylor together with NIWA to work out what we should model against. And the model is the average high tide for the year against the 100-year flood. It's still a 1 in 230-year event. So it's an event that you haven't seen in Nelson City in any of your lifetimes, I don't think. But the recommendation is don't go below that tide level. And when we model that, that gives a flood level of about, so in the year 2130, a 1 in 230-year flood would produce a level of about 3.7, just under 3.7 across the library site. To put that in context, I've had a look at the LIDAR data, and the ground level around the library at the moment looks to be about 2.7, 2.8. But around Burger King, the level as you're going around there is 3.5. So it's not unmanageable. It really isn't. So it's not a fatal flaw. It's something that the council can consider as part of its assessments. And the feedback we've had from the consultants is that we now probably have the most sophisticated, the most sophisticated flood modelling for the city of anywhere in New Zealand. But it's been worth it because some of the numbers you have seen have been much higher. I think you may have seen flood models of 4 and 4.4, and we just aren't talking those sorts of depths at all.
Thank you. So that's what so is Tonkin and Taylor going to come and present? So that's okay. And are they going to be able to do the lovely things where the dye runs out, the modelling?
Yes.
They will. Okay, thank you. Councillor Sanson. So it's not directly relevant to today's matter, but it's kind of on the thinking it was for me anyway. Councillor Sanson.
So is that going to be presented in a workshop?
Yeah, I think it's
through a workshop. Yeah. Before the Environment Committee.
And then how do we bring it back into something more formal? Because obviously it's a matter the public are enormously interested in.
Because I guess I still have a lot of questions, and I guess I'm just signalling that I'm not prepared to support a stepped approach at this time, because for me, I want to see the spatial plan and I want to see the flood modelling, and I want assurance that insurance retreat is not going to apply to the significant investment that we're making. So I just have even more questions, I guess, from sitting around the table here through that. So is there before we have all of this information coming, is there a rush to make this decision today? Does it impact the annual plan?
Yeah, it does.
What it does do is affects the money we put in the long-term plan. So yes, there is some pressure on us to get some decisions made to include in the long-term plan, or we start to lose some serious time.
So I understand, we have to keep going with the business cases so we can determine what's required in the long-term plan so that we're ready to actually put it into the long-term plan. But yet the spatial plan isn't going to be ready till the end of the year. Is that right?
So the spatial plan was very much about precincts to guide private investment, and this came out of I remember meeting with I only just started meeting with some of the cafe owners in Hardy Street. We just closed the top of Trafalgar Street. It was going gangbusters. And these cafe owners who had invested money in outdoor dining in Hardy Street were unhappy. If the council had signalled that there was going to be an outdoor dining precinct, they would have probably moved their businesses there and not invested in Hardy Street. And so this was about, as Claire has indicated, big picture messages to help guide private investment.
So my understanding was that we took $100,000 out of the climate change budget to the climate change fund to fast track the spatial plan so that we could make informed decisions about precincts, infrastructure investment, that kind of thing. So I feel like I've got the wrong end of the stick with that. So I will realign my thinking, but I'm still, I personally support an integrated approach.
So one of the other challenges will be, even when we have the flood modelling for the city, is how we respond. And that's probably going to be another 2 or 3 year piece of work in terms of, I know there's a lot of talk about retreat, and coming from the Kapiti Coast where open coast and nothing but sand dunes and gravel is down for 60 or 70 metres, no rock. Retreat was, when you're facing 6 metre high waves, is a very serious proposition. But when you're dealing with flooding, there are other options, and the council needs to consider those as well. So any spatial plan we do at the moment is going to be probably going to have to be reviewed after the council decides how it's going to respond for the next 110 years in terms of sea level rise and increased risk of flooding.
And is that a decision that we're likely to be making?
Not in that form, no. So this is where I think we've got a little bit of a mismatch. There's this thing, it's called the Nelson Plan, and guess where you're going to find out about how we do that? That is where that goes. The spatial plan, and the reason it came into the climate budget was, because I'm reasonably pragmatic. And I don't have many options when I'm coming into what I can do to fund things off the back of annual plan decisions. What we had was essentially, and I went, no, it's legitimate to take it out of there because the Act Threat's about designing a really livable city. People wanted to know where are the precincts going to be for city living? Where are the precincts? What are the different precincts and how are we going to attract business? What does that look like? How are we going to have really good cycle connections through the city? And that's the thinking. It's not a flood model plan. Believe me, it's not about inundation issues and other things like that. That must come through the technical work that underpins the Nelson Plan. And that does go through a process. And it's interesting we had that discussion this morning for the Nelson Future Access Study. The part that starts with that is talking to your community about how they feel about where they live and what things are important to them. So Ms. Barton's already done some of that work on coastal erosion issues. And the next piece, now we're getting the flood model into shape, will be actually going through and having those conversations around inundation. And we had that conversation again last night in terms of when Maxine's going to line that up, but that's where that works. The thing that I was interested in was essentially, which was what I couldn't reconcile, was how come Wakatu are okay building on this land and we wouldn't be? That was the bit that just puzzled me. I couldn't fathom out why private sector investment was happy to go there and going, no, what's your problem? And, you know, they've worked their thing out, they've done their thing, and why we were going, oh no, run to the hills. And now what I've got is actually, for that site, which is what we're looking at, the floor level issues are actually really very achievable. Well, actually, the ground level issues are actually really achievable. So it's probably the best news I've had in ages, because now it starts to resolve for me what was quite a disconnect. But I had no interest in building a library down there if it was going to have that level of inundation. I just thought, no, I'm not sure I could work with that. So that's at least I'm not walking into this meeting today going, I've got an absolute fatal flaw to say that land is we could no longer build on the Riverside precinct. I think what we've got is actually, yes, you can build on the Riverside precinct, and that wouldn't have deemed to be out of sync with either the Resource Management Act or the Building Act. And that's the two things that from a financial prudence point of view, they were the two things that really worried me. So, and it shapes, it does, it'll shape the Nelson Plan and everything else. So I hope that's helpful. So Nelson Plan does flood modelling, inundation, spatial plans at a different level. And it's a tool really to help us with engaging with the private sector and just doing some of that thinking. And why it came from the climate change budget is because I felt could probably just slip into that by definition. That's okay. So it had some positive active transport outcomes and hopefully some city living outcomes that I think are consistent with Silly, right, okay, moving on. Okay, I think we're probably onto this. So we've had it moved and seconded. We're going to, anyone going to speak, just speaking quickly?
I'm just going to speak really briefly. I just think I'm so excited by this piece of work. Thank you so much, Chris.
Yeah.
It's really encouraging to see someone who's thought carefully about the process and how we move through something which is actually quite complicated. And if you actually, for me, the integrated approach is more a mishmash approach. It's totally quite chaotic and not thought through, and there's just too many options to consider. And for me, I'd say the stepped approach is more integrated. It's strategic. It's well thought. You've heard what we've used the information we have already rather than being hypothetical. We've got quite a lot of information already. We've got quite a lot of partners. We've got quite a lot of thinking about what we'd like to do with the city and where we're moving. We have some concepts of the spatial plan. We've been reassured by the flood modelling that the site's a goer, so that's really, really exciting and reassuring. And so I'm very comfortable that the stepped approach is the most strategic and it's the most pragmatic and the fastest approach. And as a council, we are known to take decades to do anything. And I know Councillor Noonan has been waiting a long time for the library to proceed. And it's been through many annual plans and many long-term plans. And the community was consulted on the library last year. So I would really like to see this project proceed. I would really like the library project to proceed with the holistic thinking around Civic House and the Climatorium and the collaboration opportunities with Wakatu. And I think what Chris has done is he's managed to identify that and give us a very achievable timeline, which keeps a little bit of pressure on everyone to keep going. So thank you so much, because yeah, I'm very excited.
Recognising that it's stepped approaches, so it's still got a way to go to final decisions.
But I think that it will be very helpful, the workshop which Claire's having in July, and that's happening before the August meeting, which should reassure people too. Thank you, Claire.
Councillor Rainey, Councillor Neil Stevens, and then Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I'm probably completely diametrically opposed to the views of Councillor Fulton in almost every respect. I don't think that the stepped approach is the right move in this regard. And with all due respect to Councillor Noonan, having waited for years and years and years, some of us have been around this council table for a lot longer and have seen this project and many projects sit around for a long time. And believe you me, I'm as frustrated by lack of progress on things as much as anybody. Chris said that the stepped approach allows a narrowing of focus, or allows a narrowing of approach. Well, I think it creates narrowing as opposed to allowing. It depends on which way you look at it. And I'm extremely nervous about this narrowing of approach, because indeed, if we're talking that the outcome of this today is going to narrow the approach or narrow the regard that we're going to give in terms of the positioning of some civic buildings, then I think that that's a dangerous path to go down at this time, until we've had the opportunity to give further consideration to the overall plan for the city. Now, the reason for that is I think we've got a really bad track record in the city of putting in place decisions that we go on at a later date to regret. Now, I don't want to talk about the Climatorium at all, because I actually personally think that it's a complete red herring to this whole discussion. However, I do think that a spatial plan does give a high level view about what could happen in the city, and I'm really nervous that the spatial plan, as it's being talked about, is beginning to become a thorn in the side of management, and they're beginning to regret even bringing it up. And I'm really hoping that that is not the case, because I do think the city really needs to start thinking about things on a far more careful footing.
Sorry, Councillor Laurie. Councillor Laurie, apologies, Councillor Rainey. I'm going to ask you to withdraw the comment around that you made about management. I don't find that respectful to the staff.
I said, I hope it doesn't become a thorn in the side. What's that? What's wrong? Is that what you mean?
I think you said a bit more than that.
I think you said I suspect.
I suspect it's become a thorn in the side.
Oh, well, okay, I'll withdraw that. I hope it doesn't become a thorn in the side.
Yeah, I think that was.
Because I think,
So,
well, what do you want me to say? You tell me what you want
I just
to say.
withdraw those comments because they were not respectful. You can reframe.
Well, some may well think that this kind of issue may become a thorn in the side of senior management. I don't necessarily agree with that either way.
Councillor Rainey, but I find that
Oh, dear,
speculation,
oh, dear,
sort
oh,
of
dear, oh, dear.
speculation from a councillor is not appropriate.
It's his opinion.
No, I don't find
Well,
it
okay,
appropriate.
thank you, Madam Mayor.
So I'll let
Give me
you
guidance
continue.
as to what you want me to say then.
I think you should speak to the issue in front of us today.
That's exactly what I'm doing.
Right, well, I have to say you need to be really careful with your wording around showing a lack of respect to the management of this organisation.
Well, I can sincerely apologise if you take from what I've said that I am
Thank you.
creating some lack of respect for the management of this organisation, which is not at all what I was.
Happy with that apology? Chief Executive's happy with that apology as well. You can.
It would appear to me that there are numerous examples historically where this council has failed to plan properly. And we must take the opportunity to learn from those mistakes. It's really important. If we had had a proper marina plan in place where we'd worked out the spatial plan of the marina, would we have sold a pocket of land right in a very crucial part of that marina, which has gone on to prove to be, I was going to say a thorn in the side, but I'm not going to say that. With a covenant, would we have done that? No, we wouldn't, because we would know where we were headed. If we had had a proper plan in place about Rutherford Park and the recreational opportunities that were put in front of the city by having a proper integrated plan for that bit of land over there, would we have gone ahead and sold a site in that area to become a motel? I doubt it very much. We would have had a proper comprehensive plan in place. If we had a proper spatial plan for the city, that might indicate that we were going to shift civic infrastructure to a certain part of the city for whatever reason. Would we sell off Miller's Acre? At least would we build on Miller's Acre? On half of Miller's Acre? Would we indeed sell the eastern end of Wakatu Square that we owned to private interest when indeed it could have created a great opportunity for civic infrastructure? Now, this is called planning. That's what it's all about. I absolutely think we need to grab this opportunity today to say, okay, understand that people are desperate to get something underway, but we need to take our time and consider the overall planning. I'm nervous about this. I think it's potentially going to push us into a corner that's going to be tricky to retreat from. Thank you.
Councillor Neil Stevens.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I share some of Councillor Rainey's concerns as well as some of Councillor Fulton's excitement. I do think we want to get the ball rolling. If Councillor Fulton's the left hand and Pete's the right, I guess I'm somewhere in the middle, perhaps the head. And so I think what we've got here is, and in this report actually, is do options that don't deliver the best of either outcome. And I think that we could find a better solution than what we've currently been presented. I think taking a piecemeal approach of sort of decisions, which is acknowledged will have flow-on effects to the next decisions being made without first taking that step back and actually setting some broader strategic direction, is a misstep. And it's, as it says in some of the risks and disadvantages for what could potentially be one of council's and indeed social infrastructure investments that we've seen in a long while. I think for it to have the potential to not deliver strategic outcomes would be absolutely abysmal. I think that would be unacceptable to everyone around this table. And I don't see why taking something like the integrated approach, with acknowledging that the stepped approach already narrows it down within the assumptions that are put before us today, why we couldn't sit down and workshop and reduce the list of options before pursuing a more integrated approach. I don't, when I look at this timeline, it just looks for the integrated approach, it almost, it appears sort of without any, finding the right wording here, I think there could definitely be efficiency still to be found in an alternative process that walks the line between the two. We want to be taking steps forward and we want decisions to be made, but I don't think that should stop us from stepping back and actually saying and pausing while still moving forwards to take a breath and say, where do we want to be headed? You know, is there potential options that could deliver better strategic outcomes, even if that's not using finalized versions of plans, but taking a holistic approach to, this is the information that we currently have, this is the direction that us as a council want to head. Can we sit down and take a look and see if we can actually get something that's better than a slowed down approach or rushing ahead headfirst into the unknown with absolutely the potential to trip and fall and end up back at square one. And so at this stage, I don't think I could support the resolution in front of us. But I also don't think I could support going for the integrated approaches as outlined there. And actually, at this point, I think I'd be supporting letting it lie on the table for as short amount of time as possible to just sit down and see whether we can find a timeline that better suits where we want to be headed.
Thank you. Councillor Noonan and then Councillor Skinner.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Wow, interesting, isn't it? Look, I support, and the reason why I support this is that by separating the projects out, we might actually get something done. By tying them together, which we did just before Christmas, I think, we've really made no appreciable difference to any of the projects. Doesn't feel like it. We might have behind the scenes, but I certainly don't feel like we've made any progress. By separating them out, at least they can run side by side. They can talk to each other. They can realise what's happening in different areas, and the staff might be relieved. I don't know. But I think everybody would like to see some progress. It's quite sad, really. I think the biggest problem we've got is the length of time that we have in office, because we seem to get about 1 year of decision making. Takes us about 6 months. We're getting going now, I think. We get going about now, and we get about a year. If you're lucky, you might get 18 months. And then all of a sudden, everybody goes, oh, we might have different people around the table, so they might make different decisions. And here we are. And look what happens every time, and we get nothing done. So let's give this a shot. Let's stand behind the staff and give them all the encouragement they need to get something on the table and get it. I would love to see some progress, and I think everybody else would too. So I support this because I've seen that tying it together has not done anything. It certainly doesn't feel like it. So I'm supporting strongly, and I encourage those that are sitting on the fence, support it, give it a go. Got nothing to lose.
Thank you, Councillor Noonan. Councillor Skinner, then Councillor McGurk.
Thank you. Not on my stomach on this one. We've got the Old Maternal Library, the Civic House and the Climatorium. I don't believe the public really have an appetite at the moment for us spending a lot of money on moving these things around. We've sort of tethered the three together. And I think you know my views on the Climate Temple. And that's the direction that's been asked for, and Mr. Ward asked for it in this. He wants to know whether we should be pursuing any further on this, on these projects before we go to any further steps. So for me, it's not about whether it's a stepped approach or an integrated approach. I think we could make the decisions a lot easier if we didn't combine these three things together. I can sort of see these sort of spatial plans, etc., but we've tied ourselves in a knot. I mean, maybe we should be asking how much concrete is required to build the climate temple. I mean, I can see this being a long project, creating issues with, dare I say, keep my word myself here, projects that we get excited about, but I don't think the public are on board with this. I think we've got our own excitements about this for various reasons, and like I said, the climate temple needs to be taken out of that. Is it a tabernacle for a climate champion? But I can see some gains for a library.
Point of order, Madam Mayor, you had me on about Transport Idle, but for some reason you're letting Councillor Skinner really take the proverbial out of the climatorium, not once but twice, without actually calling him up on it.
Good cartoon for the little things.
Well, I don't know that it's if it was a significant building, such as the temple, and its focus was around climate change, then I actually think that could be quite a good thing. So I'm not necessarily offended by the comments. But Councillor Skinner, I think the best thing for you to do would to be focused on the option. You've got option one where you can rule them out as you go. We'll sort them out in the stepped approach. We'll put them all together. So which one are you going for?
A pilgrimage to this.
Oh, no, enough. Focus talk. We've got a lot more work to do.
No, I can't support this. I appreciate the work that's been put in. I appreciate the difficult position we're putting contractors and staff to try and come up with something that's going to be the most efficient. But I think we're. I don't want us going ahead with something when reality the public may not be behind all three of those projects, not in the bundle that we've got them.
Righty-ho. Councillor McGurk. No.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. And through you. This is one that I am a bit conflicted about, and I can appreciate Councillor Rainey and the view about keeping as many options open as we sort of start formulating what the shape of the city will look like in the next decade, 50 years, 100 years, and so forth. And I certainly I have an understanding of that view. Fortunately, some examples are used about the sale of land, but which is not what we're talking about. It's basically the shape of the city, which is probably something that's best addressed through the Nelson Plan. But it does illustrate the complexity of the issues in front of us. And for that reason, I think probably a stepped approach is probably a more pragmatic way of dealing with it. So as we approach these particular issues, we deal with that. And if we need more information about flood levels or other issues going on that, we can deal with it at the time. But it does actually deals with I think this is a really complex, there's a huge level of complexity about that, and trying to grapple with all the different parts is going to mean that we will probably risk losing our way. So for that reason, I am supporting the stepped approach because it actually makes some of the decisions making in a more manageable, more staged approach. And quite frankly, a more efficient use of our resources in terms of officer time and where they can focus their efforts. And we can deal with the risks as they're coming up. We can deal with the unknowns. And if we need more information, we can deal with it at that particular point in time. As more information comes forward, we'll probably make a more informed decision. And it just layers up. I don't like the idea of saying it's narrowing it down. It's basically, okay, we've got some issues in front of us. Let's deal with the big ones first and move our way forward. A lot of stuff is, it's been around for a long time, so I'm not sure that things like, there's some pretty basic decisions. Does Civic House stay here or does it go somewhere else? The first goes, what happens to this building? That's a decision that we can make at that particular point in time. But keeping all the options open, I hope that something better might come along. We don't know everything. It does risk that we just, inertia emerges. So it's one that I am torn about. I can appreciate the points on both sides of the argument, but I have to come down on one side, and I think the stepped approach is probably, on balance, the better way to go.
Thank you, Councillor McGurk. Then I've got Councillor Laurie, and then I've got Councillor Eggert, and then I've got Councillor Bowater, and then I've got Councillor Courtney.
It's good that we all care. So thank you. Some days I wish the French had beaten the British to Nelson. Seriously. And I think about this when we consider these sorts of issues, because if the French had got here, we would have had something like Cannes or Nice or Akaroa. And I think actually Nelson would have been a much nicer city than the one we have today, which isn't to say I don't like what we've got, but it could have been so much better. And Nelson in many ways has developed over years and years of stepped approaches. And this is what we've ended up with also a philosophy that's built on this is the way we do things. And I think that's a shame that we've ended up with some of the things we've ended up with. I'm not opposed to using the stepped approach for some projects. I think the stepped approach was the right way to go with Green Meadows. And I also believe the stepped approach is going to be the right way to go with a skate park in Stoke. And I'm really hoping we're going to be able to use that approach to get there. But this is the bit of work that is going to define what sort of city Nelson is 50, 60, 70 years from now. This is the opportunity to do something really special. And I just think leaving it up to the stepped approach and the business as usual methodology it risks too much. It risks us losing that opportunity to do something really, really special. And I also, and it may take time, but the other thing is we've heard a lot about Denmark. You know, I'm pretty sure they're into the integrated approach in Denmark and lots of things. They have long-term vision. They're very organised. They think deeply about design. And I'd be surprised if in Lemvig they would be doing something like this using the stepped approach. So for those reasons, I'm going integrated. Well, I'm voting against that.
Right, so thank you, Councillor Laurie. And now I'm on to, who did I say next? Let's keep it in order because we've got a long way to go yet. We've got a long way to go yet. So, and I don't particularly want amendments, thank you, councillors, because we've got an awful lot to do. Who's next? Councillor Egan and then Councillor Bowater and then Councillor Courtney, and I might pop up and just have a brief something to say.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There's been comments about council's track record and not talking to this council necessarily, but councils as an entity, you know, generally have a bad track record of not proceeding with projects, of talking ourselves into a state of inertia. And this project has been in LTP since 2009. There was a comment about the need to take our time. I would think we're on year 11. That's probably a good exercise of taking our time already. I'm not sure, you know, how much more time we need. There is nothing in today's decision that has us building, has us not retaining options, has us not looking at spatial plans and flood modelling. Flood modelling we know is going to be come forward to us. It has to be dealt with as part of any consenting process. And actually, there was a comment about marina. We actually did have a marina plan and council changed their mind. Yep. And so there's the, you know, talking ourselves into inertia when we change decisions, and then we have things just left. I think Mr. Ward clarified his wording around the stepped approach, that it is probably more an aligned approach, and I think that's an important semantic, because it's not about everything being absolute discrete and not taking on board and not bringing in the spatial plans, not bringing in the flood modelling, not bringing in what we want for our city. In my questioning, and again, I think the risks with the integrated approach are actually more than what was reflected in that report. And I think we have seen time and time again the delays if we broaden things out too much. And Councillor McGurk used the phrase inertia, and I'd already written it down, is that we could actually broaden ourselves into an absolute state of inertia where there is so much to deal with that we end up with no decision or going back and forward. And we know that that is what the community don't like. What they look to us for is leadership and decisions, and not taking 15, 20 years over every decision. And we're on year 11 now. All due deference to the current council who isn't on year 11, but the project is. There was a comment about Denmark. Actually, Denmark is known for being quite action focused. But as I said, this isn't a bricks and mortar action decision, and this isn't an exclusion decision where things are absolutely ruled out. So look, I believe it is a pragmatic decision to make, and I would like to see forward momentum. I would also like to see it in the 2021-31 long-term plan. And if we go with the integrated approach, we actually won't get it into that long-term plan.
Thank you, Councillor Bowater, and then Councillor Courtney. And I'm just going to speak briefly, and I'm getting ready to put the motion because we've been here for a while now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think at the workshop I possibly made my feelings abundantly clear on what I thought we should be doing with this project, and I support the stepped approach. When at the workshop Mr. Watt presented, I did and was quite emphatic about I thought that we weren't getting anywhere, and I think that Councillor Edgar has actually touched on most of the things I said at the last thing, but we seem to get in our own good way. We honestly do. And that's basically all I have to really say, because I think I made myself abundantly clear at the workshop what I thought about what we should be doing and how we should be getting things done. So, yes, we just seem to be getting in our own good way. So if we could just get on with it, please, people, it would be quite good for the community. And I think everyone would enjoy if we actually started to make this place livable with a library and get ourselves going, please, and thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Courtney.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to repeat what Councillor Fulton said. She said this is exciting, and she thanked Mr. Ward for the report, and I want to do both of those things. I think the opportunities here are exciting. I think they're bold. We should be very proud that we're spending this time on such major decisions like the Civic House possible relocation. I say possible relocation, and the climatorium. You know, what an idea. What a dream. What an initiative. And then doing it with the Danes. For goodness sake, it could be a winner. It could be a winner. And then we're looking at the library relocation as well. And I'm, like Councillor Fulton, I'm excited about it. And I just hope that we don't falter at the line. We don't falter at the line, and when we're in an inertia, as you said, but we're resisting even taking the first step. I heard Mr. Ward say that we were not required to make a decision today. We're receiving this report and adopting the stepped approach to these major decisions. And I think it's the only way we can go. And others have said the same thing. You've got to take it off in small bites. You just cannot. You'll never get, as others have said, you'll never get a decision if you're going to try and cover the three major projects in a sort of a comprehensive way. Look, I keep wanting to say Officer Ward, but I heard Mr. Ward say we can be adaptable with this. That's one thing I wrote down. He said we can keep our options open with this. And it's such early days. And I am excited about it. I think the possibilities, I think the fact that we're thinking about it is absolutely fantastic. And we're not just looking at Civic House going in the Haven precinct. We're considering other options as well. So goodness knows where it'll end. But look, let's support it. Let's just take the first step. And that's all this is. Let's not falter at the line. I don't think we will, but let's do it. And we're just playing with semantics, what the word is. First step, or, comprehensive, or whatever the word is. approach, what is the word?
Stepped approach, integrated.
Aligned. You said we don't even know what the other one is. And I don't. Progressive, yes, it could be any of those. Yeah. So look, I'm going to support it, and I think we should just move on and look forward with optimism to what else is going to follow.
Thank you, Councillor Courtney. Councillor Courtney, I think optimism is actually the right mood. I think it's fantastic that we are actually a council that is talking about doing things in our community, getting on and investing in our community, which is what actually delivers to the people of our region. And we are looking at investing in social and cultural assets, and we're looking at investing in the people that actually work in this building, who are our greatest asset, really, when we think about it, because, you know, if we want to get some things done, we've got to look after the people that are here. I think we're looking at, you know, something that is, there are different perspectives. They could be seen as a red herring, or they could be seen as a temple, or whatever you want to call them. You know, if we talk about the issue of climate change. But actually, I think that that's a fantastic conversation and concept to be having, and at an international collaboration level, that excites me. Whether that's going to be virtual, whether it's going to be physical, we don't know yet. But let's start and get on with this and start that conversation. I could reflect, and I was interested in listening to the projects that this council has done so poorly at and shouldn't have done. Not one of those things is, I mean, I've been here for a while now. The Marina Land Sale predates me. I've got no idea when the Palms Motel got on that site, but it wasn't when I was on council. And I've got no idea when this piece over here got sold off to the East Council, the Councillor Rainey referred to, but it was certainly before I was on council. So this council, that's 20 years ago thinking. That's 20 years ago thinking. And we're in a different space of going, actually, we've had some good conversations. We've thought conceptually about what's here. And what Mr. Ward is bringing back to us now is a way to actually transition the thinking into results and outcomes for our community. And at a time when our community needs investment, and it needs positivity, and it needs optimism, I actually think this is a really good approach. It's procedural. Absolutely. And what it's asking you to do is come along and talk, work some things through on the 13th of August. And before that, to have had some updates on flood modelling. And I'm hoping a briefing in terms of what the city development team's been doing around the conceptual spatial plan, because by now, Alan's a fantastic talker, even if he hasn't got it on paper, he'll be able to talk to us about it. And we've seen some of that work. So I hope you can support this today. I hear, Councillor Skinner, that you don't like all of those pieces of that project, but what the STEP approach offers is your chance to have your say in deciding on whether they proceed or not. And you get to do it sooner rather than later, rather than it being tied up in a bundle of spaghetti. I mean, I have sat through how many concept plans, and I'm looking at some of the other people in this room, have seen actually marina development plans that get to one end of council term, and I desperately, desperately want to get them moved through. And then we get to election times, and it starts the jockeying around elections and not supporting because, you know, because it all gets very political, and then things don't happen. And really, I don't want to be that council again. I want us to get some stuff done. You know, I want to get some stuff planned out so that when we come to this end of the, you know, the triennium, actually the people of Nelson have got some vision and direction and some confidence about what we're doing. Because I actually think they deserve that. All right, right reply, Councillor.
Thank you. Look, I've listened really carefully to the people who've spoken against, and I'm a little bit perplexed because when we looked at the Streets for People, there was no request for a spatial plan, and there was no request to wait for the outcome of the Nelson Future Access Study, both of which influence how we take care of our Trafalgar Street and Hardy Street and Bridge Street. And, you know, Alan's got some pretty cool thinking about whether we could have one-way lanes and all sorts of future thinking in terms of what we might do with our streets, yet we know as a community we can do things and do things now, and that can shape the future. So I'm a little perplexed by the desire to hold this process up when it is just a pretty well considered process in terms of moving forward and stopping the inertia that's been happening, because it is quite a complicated process if you're considering 3 significant projects on one site. To me, this has the potential to be the next wow or the next Te Papa for Nelson. It has a huge potential. It should be a significant project, and we should do the thinking behind it. And I think we should this is, in approving this today, it's the opportunity for staff to inform councillors of what the thinking is, and then to deliver a program business case which can inform the LTP and give the community the chance to have their say. If we don't take this approach, then we will not be able to go out with that next year. And that means just another few years of talking the talk rather than walking the walk. So I really hope that those who are concerned about other bits not quite lining up yet will give the officers a chance to get those pieces in the jigsaw puzzle in place during the course of the year, and you'll get your chance to make those final decisions next year when we shape the long-term plan.
Right, I'm going to put the motion. I paused because Chief said I had the piece of paper ready and I was thinking maybe you won't get to use it. Yeah.
It's a blue piece. And it's got the writing.
Come on.
Come on, make it exciting. Make it exciting. Make it exciting.
Councillor Skinner.
Yes.
Councillor Sanson.
Very optimistic, no.
Councillor Rainey. No. Councillor O'Neill-Stevens.
No.
Councillor Noonan.
Yes.
Councillor McGurk.
Yay.
Councillor Laurie.
No.
Councillor Fulton.
Aye.
Councillor Edgar.
Aye.
Councillor Courtney.
Aye.
Councillor Brand.
Reluctantly, yes.
Councillor Bowater.
Aye. No
Madam Mayor.
Aye. Right, that procedural recommendation was passed 9 votes to 4. Thank you. Look forward to seeing you again sometime soon. Chris, thank you for the work you put into the report, into the project to date. Now, EJ, does that conclude our open agenda? Yep. We believe that concludes our open agenda at 4:25. So we'll take a 5-minute stretch and then we'll, actually I'll move us into public excluded now. Can I just move into public excluded? I'm moving, Councillor O'Neill-Stevens is seconding. I'm putting the motion. Can I just